This podcast is about naming and writing the formulas for compounds, ionic compounds that have transition metals. So the names and formulas for ionic compounds from transition metals. Remember that transition metals are the elements that are in the B groups, which are groups 3 through 12 in the periodic table, the ones in the middle. These are just a sampling of some of the transition metals and some of the charges that they can make. It's not complete. And we aren't even going to use all of these. There's a really old-fashioned way of naming transition metals, like cuprous and cupric for the copper ions, ferrous and ferric for the iron. We are not going to use these methods, but just in case you see them, you should know where they come from. We are going to use what are called the systematic names, which is where we put the charge of the element in Roman numerals right next to its name. So chromium 2 would mean chromium with a +2 charge. And copper 1 would mean copper with a +1 charge. Remember that metals are always cations. They always have a positive charge. As a side note, we're not going to use these till later, but just so that you know, silver and zinc are found with the transition metals, but they're actually not. They have charges that never change. And you're expected to know that silver is always +1 and zinc is always +2. And that's something that we'll use the rest of the year. So we'll add that a little bit later. For naming transition metals, you must include the charge of the metal in the name, and that's done with the Roman numeral, just like here. So the name of lead becomes lead-2 to tell you the charge on lead. You have to include the Roman numeral. If you include the Roman numeral when you're not supposed to, for non-transition metals, it's actually considered wrong. So for practice, we're going to write the names and or the formulas for the following compounds. So for the first one, tin 2 fluoride, we know the charge on tin because it's in Roman numerals, which is 2. So tin has a +2. Fluoride is an anion that never changes. It's still -1, same as always. Put them together, make a formula, SnF2. We don't include the Roman numeral in the formula. We know that it's there, but it's not. We don't write it down here in the formula. So for the next one, we're given the formula. We have to figure out the name. So we have to figure out the charge on chromium. We know the charge on iodide is always -1. So we have to use that to figure out chromium's plus charge. So iodide is -1. There are 3 iodides, each with -1. So all of the anions together have a total charge of -3. So the cations have to balance this out to add up to 0. So we know that chromium has to be +3. So therefore it is chromium 3 with a charge of +3 iodide. So for the rest of these, shut off your video. Go ahead and try them. Use scratch paper. Don't try to figure it all out on your head. And then turn the video back on to check your answers. Okay, if you have any questions, definitely go and talk to your instructor to figure out what you're doing. Okay, so here the formulas are given. You're going to use the anion charge to figure out the charge on the transition metal, and then from there figure out the name and write the name down. So stop the video, go through and figure them out, and then check your work. Okay, so check your answers, and if you have any questions, please see your teacher. All right, here you are given the names, and use the names with the charges and the transition metals to then figure out what the formula is going to look like. Okay.